what a shock. The Philadelphia Eagles feature prominently in this year's schedule. We already knew that they had 4 standalone big platform games from the games that were previously disclosed, but they have 5 primetime games. I'm surprised there aren't more.
Yeah,
and one thing that surprised me, if you look, Chris, at their specific schedule, there's a lot of 1 o'clock Eastern games.
Yeah.
On it. We don't have the Sunday times on this, but there's a lot of 1 o'clock Eastern games, like good games at 1 o'clock Eastern, like the Rams game is 1 o'clock Eastern. I think the Bucs game is 1 o'clock Eastern. There's a lot of 1 o'clock Eastern games that could have been either 4:25 p.m. or prime time.
The last few years, the Eagles have had a favorable schedule, right? I mean, I believe the last 2 times they went to the Super Bowl, we basically were like, they're going to be 9-1 or 10-1 at this point of the year. We knew that. So it had shaken out in a few years here to be very favorable. This is not so favorable. Now, I don't think it's one of the hardest out there. I know it's up there. I think it's ranked the 4th hardest schedule, too. But part of the schedule, too, is how it does lay out. And the short weeks and how much are you jumping around time zones and all that. That is part of it. But you look at this and you go, hey, the opener, the Cowboys, hey, openers are never easy. Will you be distracted by unleashing the banner that night? The Cowboys are going to come into town motivated. Then you got 4 playoff teams right after that. So, I mean, they're going to be put to the test early. The parade has to end, and they got to get back to business and be ready to go. And then they get, the Giants 2 out of 3 weeks.
A short week of the
Giants. Right.
Nothing against your Giants, Chris, but for crying out loud, of all the great games on the Eagles' schedule, they're gonna send a game where the spread's gonna be at least 9.5. They're going to play that game on Thursday night? Are you kidding me?
I hear you, but they're probably trying to fit the Giants in somewhere, and especially get them in there early in the year because it's the New York market, and we, before they fall apart, or the chances of them falling apart or not being that great. I mean, we don't know how good the Giants will be, so I guess that's what goes into that. There, it is a rivalry game. There's some excitement there, but it's not the worst. But yeah, on that too, the Giants' schedule is brutal. I mean, it's brutal. To me, it's one of the hardest I've seen in football here. But yeah, the Eagles, they got some work cut out for them early on in the season here. They're going to have to be on their P's and Q's right from the get-go and play good quality football because, yeah, they got some teams there that give them problems, and they have some problems with in the past.
On that whole New York market thing, That's one of my pet peeves as it relates to the NFL because you're just chasing a big number, even if it's not a game that fans outside of New York are going to give a crap about. I don't like that. We're going to cater to the big market at the expense of everyone else. Eagles-Giants is not. Of the games that were available on the Eagles' schedule to be dropped into Thursday night, Eagles-Giants would have been at the bottom of the list. They've got 4 games at 1 o'clock Eastern on a Sunday against playoff teams from last year. The Rams, the Bucs, the Broncos. The Rams, the Bucs, the Broncos, and that's it. And the Vikings.
The Vikings, right.
Boom. And there's 2 other 1 o'clock games, Giants and Raiders. At 6, that's 6 1 o'clock Eastern games for a team that is a juggernaut right now. That's surprising to me.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised they're not, showcased more just because of what they are, how good their football team is. They're such a safe bet. I feel like where they are now as an organization, as a team, like the floor for them is like, oh, okay. They went 12-5. They went 11-6 and stumbled or stubbed their toe a few times during the year and lost focus. That's about as bad as it could get. But yeah, good to see them, of course, in a number of marquee games, but also surprised that they're not at the top of the list of the marquee games and what they're doing there. I mean, they're being used and they're going to be in big moments and we're going to see them on TV. But yeah, I did not look at the overall schedule and think it was killer. It's tough for sure, right? But I will also say, and I'll say this not so delicately, they certainly have not been as okay, yes, I said that word, like the Kansas City Chiefs are being with their schedule, which is, I think, the craziest schedule I've ever seen in my career with what the Chiefs are being asked to do this year. And I don't mean to change the subject, but just because the Chiefs-Eagles play week 2 and some of the stuff we're talking about here, I am in amazement of what the NFL is asking of the Chiefs this year.
I want to say one more thing about the Eagles before we move on.
Okay, cool.
The number of primetime games reinforces my belief that Tush Push is dead next week. We've already talked about that when we knew that there were 4 standalone games. So I think that a week from today,
but it's going to be so dead. It's going to be alive. That's what's going to happen.
You're right.
It's going to be alive. I mean, they're going to be like, screw you. The hell with the push part. We're going to run it more. I just feel like that's the Eagles' attitude. I feel like that's how they'll approach it.
They're going to continue to run an awesome quarterback sneak that's going to be highly effective, and it's going to be a middle finger to 345 Park Avenue, which I firmly believe is behind this. The Packers are the straw man, I believe, for what the league, possibly all the way up to the guy whose name is on every football, wants to be gone, possibly sparked by what happened in the NFC Championship when the Commanders jumped offside 3 straight times. We can't have that. And then that became the first domino that's going to result in the tush push being gone. Also, just a weird thing that I noticed that may have simply been a typo. Yeah. But on the official NFL.com schedule for Week 16,
right,
that Commanders game has already been announced as part of a Saturday, December 20 doubleheader on Fox.
Yeah.
It's already been announced.
Right.
And that goes up against college football playoffs that day. On the official NFL.com page, when you click on Week 16, it says that game and the other game are being played on Friday the 19th, not Saturday the 20th. And
it doesn't say that on an NFL Jesus, just so you know.
But right. It's one of those, like, that's a weird typo. Like, it's not like transposing the J and the H on your keyboard. Like, why would you even put Friday in there? I know they play on Black Friday and on the first Friday, but it's not like Friday's part of the regular rhythm late in the season. It's Saturday. It's Saturday and Sunday and Monday and Thursday. But Friday doesn't enter the equation. And I don't know, part of me just wonders whether they were toying with the idea at some point of playing 2 games on Friday, because that's one of the other ways I think they're going to be looking to cram pizza or cheese in the pizza or pizza in the cheese. There's so much cheese in the pizza, it's now pizza in the cheese. But those Fridays after the second weekend in December are fair game. And that was what I saw that and I thought, were they thinking about this and this is just a leftover from when they were maybe thinking about playing a couple games on a late season Friday during the holidays? It's just something to keep an eye on.
No, definitely.
And the Eagles website, and this is why I looked at it. I'm glad Pete pointed this out.
Right.
This is why I went to the NFL.com website to see what it said for Week 16, because on the Eagles website, the date says TBD.
Right. It says
not
time.
The time.
It says
the
time
date says TBD
on what I look at with my NFL GSIS, right? But yeah, it's peculiar that they can mess up such a detail like that. You're exactly
maybe NFL
right.
G's has been turning too much water into wine and drinking it.
Hey,
I don't know. Somebody's wrong on this.
Yeah, no, I know. I hear that. But either way, the Eagles.
That was sacrilegious. By the way. I'm going to hell.
Yeah, no, when football, it's all fair. Okay, so don't worry. We're talking football here. First 5 games, tough. They got another stretch there with the Packers, Lions, Cowboys, Bears, Chargers in the middle of the schedule that you go, ooh, that's pretty damn tough as well, because I think we all think the Bears will be a better team. And then you look at the end of the year, and here's what you're talking about,
That's
Mike.
What I'm talking about.
The Friday, December 19th. Yeah, they're obviously out of whack there. But the end of the year, 2 out of the last 3 games of the year, Commanders twice, Bills sandwiched in between. I mean, wow, could that have playoff ramifications, seeding ramifications, maybe NFC East champion ramifications? Who knows what it'll mean to the Bills and their seeding in the AFC? So I found that to be quite interesting about the end of the Eagles schedule as well.
Yeah, look, hey, when you're the defending champion and you're first in the division, you're going to get a ton of playoff games, playoff teams from last year. That is my one pet peeve, though. I've got 2 pet peeves about the schedule release, and I've been meaning to mention it. One, and they they're never going to stop doing it, but the whole Mike and the Mad Dog thing where you go through, that's a win, that's a loss, that's a win, that's a loss. That is just freaking, it's such a joke. There's a whole season to be played. Nobody is in a position to pick the outcome of games in December, but it's what they do. I get it. When in Rome. The strength of schedule issue is misleading because it's based on last year's record. And I know that's all they have to go on. But we don't know which teams last year that were good are going to be bad. The bad, they're going to be good. The teams that have had coaching changes, quarterback changes, these are not the same teams. Maybe this worked back in the 70s or 80s when there wasn't free agency. But in this day and age, the 2024 version of any given team is going to be, for the most part, very different from the 2025 version. So let's not get caught up, football fans and football media, in strength of schedule based on last year, because last year for most teams was a very different year.
No, exactly right. I think you're exactly right about that. And I think, off of that, right, and where we're smart, and Pete Demoletta-Letalitis is smart. When we talk about projected wins or strength of the schedule, we're going off of the projected wins from what people think this year in 2025. But yeah, there's no exact science there. But you can still glean certain things. Who cares about, necessarily the record of what, if we're going to win or lose in November and December? There is still certain teams where you just go, man, if you're on the road against them with that coach and that quarterback, that's going to be tough, right? So you can do that. I'm not going to sit there and go win-loss on November 30th and, win-loss on December 12th and do all that. But you can certainly look at a stretch and go, I'm just, by example, hey, they're at Detroit. Whoa, they're at Minnesota. Oh, they're home against the Rams. It's just like, wait, the culture there with the teams and those players, it's going to be tough. We know that. But yeah, wins and losses, that's a little far-fetched.
Well, and again, we never know who's going to get injured and when and for how long they're going to be out, and it can change everything, and we know every year it happens. It's a surprise if it doesn't happen. There will be significant injuries that make a tough team a weak team, a much weaker team, because of the drop-off from the starter to the replacement. And look at the Eagles. They get 7 primetime games. When I asked North about competitive integrity issues as it relates to the schedule, his knee-jerk reaction was, it hasn't hurt the Chiefs. It hasn't hurt the Chiefs. And then he added near the end, we'll see how the Eagles react. And yes, we will, with 7 primetime games. No back-to-back home games, which I think the fans kind of enjoy. It's kind of, if you go to the games, it's a whole deal, and I'd rather space it out and go every other week. I like that part of it if I'm a fan. You just never get to really settle in at home for an extended stretch if you're going every other week on the road, and that's the good news. If you're not going to have back-to-back home games, well, because there are 9 road games, you do have back-to-back road games late in the season at the Commanders and at the Bills. So they do go away from home twice, but they are not at home more than one weekend in a row, Shireen.
Yeah, first Super Bowl champion in history, Mike, since they've done this. Super Bowl champion plays on that Thursday. They're the first one not to have 2 home games to start the season. But I'm with you. I would prefer it like they have it right now, and kind of space those out a little bit. And so they get the Chiefs early and get a chance. I mean, that's a game we're all looking forward to. But they're also, Mike, the first team to play 10 teams from the previous season that made the playoffs. And the prime time, the fourth toughest schedule, all those teams that made the playoffs, everything else, it looks daunting. The good news for them is they have extra rest for the Chiefs, the Vikings, the Packers, the Chargers, and the Bills. So that's the good news for them. They do have they have the bye week, and then they have some mini buys in there with all these night games that they play. So that's the good news is they do get to play some of these really hard teams with extra rest. So that's the good thing. But it's a really, really hard schedule. And I know we all base it on last year, and things change, and all the good teams last year aren't necessarily good this year, and some of the teams that we don't think are going to be good end up being good. I get all that, but it's still, no matter, it's still going to be a really tough schedule that the Eagles have to play this year.
And by the way, and I'm not saying this sarcastically, I hate being that guy, but here's what happens. If I don't mention this, I'm going to have at least 5, maybe 10 emails that I'm going to have to deal with. So there was one year where the Super Bowl champion didn't have the first 2 games at home that you didn't mention. And I think you know what I'm talking about. Do you? This is an impromptu, completely and totally unplanned trivia question. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, the one where, who was it that had I think it was Baltimore, had they couldn't play at home because of the Orioles, so they end up not getting the game that year. So that would be the one exception to this rule.
They got to choose between opening at home on Sunday or having the Thursday night game on the road in Denver. And they opted to go on the road because John Harbaugh decided it was better to have the extra rest going into week 2 than it was to open the season at home celebrating the Ravens Super Bowl championship. And you just wonder, 12 years later, if something like this would happen where there'd be a conflict over the parking lot between football and baseball. I have a feeling football wins. I have a feeling baseball changes its starting time, especially when for a lot of these baseball teams that aren't very good, and I don't know if the Orioles are any good this year, how many people are really showing up for those games?
No.
In comparison to how many show up for NFL games, right? Are the Astros any good this year?
Well, and it's the same in... No, they're not that good. 500.
I know the Pirates. Stink. I can tell you the Pirates stink without checking how the Pirates are doing because it is the safest of all assumptions that you can make that the Pittsburgh Pirates suck.
The Philadelphia Eagles are walking into the 2025 season with a schedule that doesn't offer any breathing room. 11 of their opponents made the playoffs in 2024. They don't get a single pair of back-to-back home games all season. And just when you think the pressure couldn't get any tighter, NFL Network's Colleen Wolfe weighs in with a game-by-game prediction that has fans talking. But today's video isn't just about matchups and records. It ends with something more meaningful, the 2025 Eagles Autism Challenge. So stick around, because what the Eagles are doing off the field might be even more impressive than what's coming on it. Let's start with what has reportedly been called one of the most challenging schedules in the entire league. Pro commentators broke down the numbers, and the Eagles will face 11 teams that made the playoffs just last year. That includes big rosters like the Chiefs, the 49ers, and the Bills. However, it's not just the quality of opponents, but the final stretch of the season makes the schedule rough. The Eagles will face the Washington Commanders twice in 3 weeks, with a game against the Buffalo Bills wedged in between. That 3-game run could decide playoff seeding, or if the Eagles even make it in. Analysts believe this team can handle pressure. 5 of their games are in primetime slots. Given that, the spotlight is literally going to be on from week 1 all the way through week 18. Notably, as per the schedule, the Eagles need to alternate home and away every single week. It might not seem like a big deal apparently, but ask any former player or coach. Back-to-back home games make recovery and preparation easier. Without that, the team is constantly on the move. It's tough on bodies, coaching routines, and obviously, on logistics. The lack of rest windows between road trips and homestands can quietly chip away at a roster over time, especially if injuries begin to pile up. This kind of schedule hasn't been seen often, and it naturally raises fair questions. Are the Eagles being tested by the league? Or is this just how the chips fell? Either way, it's one more layer of difficulty added to an already complex season. Now, let's talk about something different and something genuinely optimistic. On May 17th, 2025, the Eagles hosted their annual Autism Challenge event at Lincoln Financial Field. More than 7,200 people participated in this year's event, including players, coaches, staff, and fans from across the globe. There were multiple events like 30-mile bike rides, 10-mile rides, 5K runs and walks, and even a sensory-friendly walk for families. The purpose of the event was funding autism research and care programs. It raised more than $10 million in one day. Since the Autism Challenge began, the Eagles have raised over $40 million in total. That level of sustained commitment to something off the field is not very common. In fact, it speaks volumes about the leadership of owner Jeffrey Lurie, who gave a heartfelt speech thanking everyone involved. The event somehow reminds that the Phillies are not a random football team and they don't want to confine impact to the field or at the end of the broadcast. Doesn't that kind of story deserve as much attention as a playoff prediction? So, one of the toughest schedules in the NFL, no cushion with home games, some unapologetically confident season forecasts, and a team paying enough attention to off-the-field responsibilities. That is how Philly's 2025 picture looks right now. If you've got your own win-loss prediction for the Eagles this season, drop it in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll catch you soon in the next one.